Hello and welcome to another episode of our Brothers Creed podcast, where we talk about motivation, experiences, and exploring the world around us. We're the Thomas Brothers, and I'm Jared.
And I'm Ethan. Today we're going to be talking with Nick Anderson. He is a lawyer. We kind of break down several different types of, instances in your life where you might need legal advice. We talk about he initially got in through personal injury and did a lot of that. But this episode is mostly based around estate planning. We talk about kind of the future. We talk about probate, which is, after someone has passed away, or hopefully potentially doing a trust or a will before anything happens. So it was really interesting in kind of getting a simplified version of what is the best strategy for your situation.
Yeah, and obviously, it varies by state and obviously country too. But he just gives some good general advice, technically not advice, just good general knowledge about what maybe somebody with, husband, wife, kids might want to be doing as far as planning for the future. So it was a great episode. Let's go ahead and jump in.
All right, let's do it.
Spartans! What is your profession?
Any man who must say, I am the king, is no true king.
What I do have are a very particular set of skills. Skills that make me a nightmare.
If I can change, and you can change, everybody can change!
Let us all unite! Let us fight for a new world, a decent world.
Okay, all right, we're here with Nick Anderson. Nick, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Nick is a good friend of mine. He is a lawyer extraordinaire, and we're excited to have him come talk about some different estate planning things and maybe get some good tips on how we can plan for our futures. So, again, appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thank you guys for having me.
So, Nick, if you could start out and just give us a little bit of background. How did you kind of get on the path that you're currently on? And maybe how did you get to the point to where you've kind of specialized or kind of gone into one specific direction?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. A lot of things, I think, led me to where I'm at right now. But the way that I got into law school was I didn't know what I wanted to do in college, as I'm sure most people don't know what they want to do. I was taking a lot of pre-medicine classes because I wanted to be a dentist, I thought. My dad was always like, doctor, dentist, or lawyer, you take your pick. So, I was just kind of feeling it out a little bit, and I would get decent grades in science classes. I'd get in like biology, chemistry, you had to take all those. I would get A's, and I'd get a B every once in a while. You just can't really do that when you're going to go to dental school. You got to get pretty much A's. But I came across these history classes, and I did really well in them. And there was an American Heritage class that I was in, and it was like 800 students, and everyone talked about how terrible it was. And I literally had like one of the best grades in the class, and I just thought it was fun. I didn't really try that hard. But particularly one thing in there I learned about was John Adams and his trial defending the soldiers, the British soldiers. And I came across a book by David McCullough. John Adams was the name of it. Mm-hmm. And you guys may have heard about that. I mean, David McCullough is one of my favorite historians. I just read a book by his about the Wright brothers. And then you guys did a podcast about the Wright brothers.
Yeah.
Yep.
But anyway, that, and there's an HBO series on John Adams, and it literally changed my life. I was just like, this is unbelievable. Like the series was incredible. I felt like that gave me a little bit of confidence to go be a lawyer for whatever reason. I don't know. I just knew that if I got decent grades, I could get into law school, and history came easy to me because it's basically just reading things and then spitting back out information.
Precedent.
Yeah, I mean, we just listen to podcasts for history now. So everyone's a history major at this point. So anyway, I got into law school that way, and went to Gonzaga Law School up in Washington State. Everyone knows them because of the basketball team. which was great for getting hired. I was during the time when it was a little bit hard to get hired. Between 2012 and 2015, I think it started picking up by the time I got out, like jobs, especially for like professionals. And I went in Vegas. I was practicing in Las Vegas at an insurance defense firm, which was not what I wanted to do. I wanted to be on the plaintiff side. So I did that for about a year, and then there was a few firms that wanted you after that. So I went to PI. We call it PI. It's not private investigation. It's personal injury, and attorney acronyms. Am I talking too much?
No, you're good. No,
okay.
go
ahead. All right.
No, that's the idea.
And so I loved it. I loved it because it was really competitive, and you get paid by the case, and it's like a chase, and it's a game, and you get you do help people,
and you're fighting against the insurance companies,
and you're fighting against
which are always the bad guys.
Yeah, and everybody thinks they're funny. They just have funny commercials. They suck. They nickel and dime everybody, and they try to manipulate everyone into
rob you blind. Yeah,
absolutely. And they try to send you a couple $100 paycheck and close you out and be done.
Oh yeah.
And meanwhile, you're stuck with like a bulged disc in your neck for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
But anyway, I did that for a couple years, and then I just in networking ran into somebody who pursued me pretty strongly. I kept saying no, and they finally offered me to come down here to be a partner with them. And so I came back, and I grew up here in North Carolina. So I came down here, and we partnered up, and we mainly do personal injury. I've grown a little bit weary of just doing personal injury. So, like you guys are really intellectually curious. I get that way too. And I got to kind of stimulate, my brain activity doing a lot of things. And, you can only read so many just books. So you want to do other things too. So I started down the path of like estate planning. I also got into a little bit of probate, which we'll talk about as two separate things.
Okay.
Just completely two separate areas that are kind of indirectly related. So that is kind of how I got started doing this. I've probably been doing this for a couple of years now in estate planning. So I've done personal injury way longer. I've probably been practicing 7 years now, I think.
Nice.
But
yeah. That's good, man. Great backstory.
Yeah, thank you.
For personal injury, does this include obviously car accidents, but does it include any type of personal injury? Like if I slip in Walmart and I'm like, oh my gosh, they
didn't put carpets out.
Yeah,
the floors are wet.
I heard a story on the radio about the guy who went into Walmart and he tripped on a nail or something like that, and then it was like he ended up winning a lawsuit for multi-millions of dollars because the nail ended up being like had tetanus on it, and he lost his whole leg because of it. And it was like they proved that they didn't sweep the aisles at the right time, and so he won a huge suit against him.
Yes.
Do you do any of those?
Yes. Walmart's particularly aggressive in their litigation. Which you would think. I mean, there's a big corporation. They're going to aggressively defend their rights, which they should. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, if you can prove that the right procedures aren't being put in place, then there's a problem. They're inviting people into the premises, and if they have tetanus nails laying on the floor that are going to lose limbs, you don't want your wife, your kids,
stepping on that,
your grandma.
We had a, it wasn't a personal injury, but at Walmart, we did like the Walmart grocery pickup, and the person that was putting the groceries in the back of our SUV, like, I don't know what they were doing. They were playing basketball or something, but they ended up putting the milk in like upside down, and it leaked like almost 3/4 of the gallon into the car and all underneath the carpets and the floorboards, like all the way up to the driver's seats. And it smelled horrible. I mean, it was like in the middle of the summer, and it was terrible. And so we called them. We were like, look, you guys put this thing in there upside down. It's like, it's one thing to squish the bread, but it's another thing to dump a whole gallon of milk all over the back of the car. And so I ended up going out and getting quotes to replace all of the carpets in the whole car, and it was like thousands of dollars. And then we had submitted a claim, and the guy was like, yeah, well, whatever you submit, basically he said, just make sure it's under $3,000 or it's going to be like a huge, you have to like go to court and all this sort of kind of stuff for it. He was like, but under $3,000, we can just write you a check. And
that's odd.
Yeah, it was weird. And so luckily the cost to repair this stuff was like $2,800.
Oh, okay.
And so they sent us a check for $2,800. It was just like, I guess if it was under that threshold, they don't even want to spend the time to deal with it. It's just like, whatever.
Yeah, I think sometimes they got to take into account how much it's going to cost to hire an attorney to go defend it.
Yeah.
And so they would just pay you at that threshold. Okay, if it goes over that, then we're just going to go ahead and pay an attorney to defend.
Yeah, that makes sense. But it was just interesting.
That is interesting. So you got it all taken care of?
Yeah, I ended up, the car was out of commission for a while, but we ended up
No, it wasn't. You were right down the highway with your windows down.
Oh, man, it was bad. It was really bad. And so we ended up taking all of the carpets out, having it professionally cleaned.
Yeah.
And I ended up having to like scrape out. There's like this plastic molding stuff that actually like soaked up all the milk, so I had to scrape all that out. Ended up not having to replace all the carpets, but and we had to get professionally detailed, and it was a big job. I mean, I personally spent hours and hours and hours messing with it.
All right. Note to self: if we do grocery pickup, check the milk.
But it doesn't smell anymore, so
that's good.
Either that or I'm used to
it. So one of the things you mentioned was the different. You said wealth, estate planning, and probate are kind of two different things, but they're similar. Maybe let's start on probate. Could you give us a sense of what probate is? For the layman, assume that I'm a kindergartner and I know nothing.
Yeah. So probate is when the death occurs, right? And we call them the decedent's estate. You have to go administer the estate because the person who owns all those assets is the decedent, right? So you're going to have to go transfer title of all those assets over to whoever it is that is entitled to it based on the will. If there is no will, it's intestacy, so it's going to be according to the laws of the state. So probate is the second half of it. Estate planning is for you when you're alive and you're planning everything out. I'm glad that I did both because, and this is neither here nor there, but you kind of see how it plays out with what you're doing. Like, there's only so much you can say when you're just looking at a paper saying, well, this is what this means, until you've actually seen it play out in court.
Oh, yeah.
So it is two separate laws. It's based on the same laws, but it's two separate areas of practice. So a lot of people can be estate planning lawyers and not practice in probate, and it's actually litigating in probate. Well, it's not litigating. Sometimes it is. But a lot of times, people come out of the woodworks.
Oh, yeah.
And there's always some will from somewhere. And so you kind of got to be prepared for that.
Have you ever run up against a fraudulent will? People who fake wills?
Well, I think so. I've had wills that have been just drawn up by somebody that aren't valid. And you just got to weigh the cost of whether you want to litigate it or not, because you have to file a caveat action to contest it. And it's expensive. And the client's going to have to pay you to go do that. And you got to, in probate, we bill by the hour, right? So it's like, anywhere from $250 to $450 an hour for an attorney. It's expensive. So you better make sure you win something, and you can't guarantee results to somebody. You can say what you think and what you advise based on law and past experience, and you're the expert. But so probate is administering the will or whatever it is. If there is no will, it's intestacy. So testate, meaning there is a will, you've given a will, you've given instructions. Intestacy is if there's not. And so you go in and you get an executor. That's one of the questions in here, I think. An executor or a personal administrator is the person who's designated in the will to do it. They have to be qualified. There's a bunch of qualifications, and then you have to get letters from the judge. Everything in probate has to be issued by the clerk and approved by the clerk, and it's...
Why does this go through the government? Why is it even... Why is the system set up that way?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I think,
Just because they want their cut, or
probate, this is going to go back hundreds and hundreds of years. I mean, probably into, England.
I'm sure, yeah.
So I don't know the answer to that question.
I didn't research back that far.
You didn't put that in the prompt here. But, it's to supervise, to make sure that executors aren't taking advantage of people, that people aren't taking away from the true beneficiaries who should be entitled to the assets. So the judge is always an intermediary. It's the same way in a regular case. They're going to be there to decide whether, to make sure procedures are followed, to make sure that people aren't being taken advantage of, and also give an opportunity for people to have justice or their day in court.
Mm-hmm.
Who pays for it? I mean, is it the estate that pays for it, or the executor, or could some random person hire you to say, I want to be in on this will, I should be in on this will, or...
Yeah. So those are all good questions. It's the estate that pays for it. The executor, it depends on if there's in the will, you could say, I don't require my executor to post a bond. So the reason why you'd have to post a bond would be because it's a lot on an executor to administer the will properly. So the executor goes and hires an attorney because they can't do it on their own. I mean, they can try, and maybe they can in small estates, but they hire an attorney, and that attorney is paid through the estate. The attorney is actually one of the first, few on the list of order of who's paid. Mm-hmm. Funeral expenses at the top, attorney, then like debtors, with the state first. The state debtor is going to be first. This is North Carolina laws. Yeah. So if
you forgot to do your caveat.
I did.
This is not legal advice.
None of this is legal advice. You got to check with your state that you're in, and I'm just giving generalities here. But I practice North Carolina. That's where I'm licensed. I'm actually licensed in Nevada too, but it's inactive status. But yeah, so that's who pays for it, and there can be people who come and hire another attorney, and those are like the interested parties. So if it's like a beneficiary, like the nephew who was promised this, or they're named this in the will, they'll bring it to an attorney and make sure that their interests are being represented properly too.
Yeah. Some kind of Carol Baskin situation where she had her like this will created that wrote the guy's old ex-wife and daughters off of the will, like after he was dead or something like that. And
then he gets eaten by a tiger.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So how does this work in practicality? So let's say Grandma Susie dies in the middle of the woods. She's just out in just some small town somewhere. Okay. And her son and her daughter, and then one of her brothers, who's got a key to the house, he comes and drops off groceries. She dies. He goes into the house. He grabs a TV. He grabs some old guns. He grabs the four-wheeler key and takes off with the four-wheeler. And he says, "Oh yeah, I sold that for her. I sold it, or I'm going to sell it for her, for the estate.
She gave it to me."
And then, who's the executor? Is it the uncle? Like, who does the state decide is going to be the executor, and how can you guarantee that person's actually going to be, like, give a full reckoning of the assets? How does this work in actuality?
Yeah, those are good questions. So this is why I don't love probate. And I actually only have a few probate cases, and I'm trying to get out of them. Not get out of them, but finish them up.
Yeah.
Because it just it's kind of like family law, where things just get wild, wild west a little bit.
I feel like this would happen all the time.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about little, tangible assets. Like tangible meaning like you can touch them. They're just your personal property. Intangibles are other things like stocks and real property is different from tangible property. So, it's just going to be up to the family a little bit and up to the executor or executrix if it's a woman. Okay. Yeah. And so it'll be up to them. I hope I'm right on that. I'll sound really dumb if I'm not.
We'll fact check.
Yeah, I need to fact check.
It sounded cool though.
Yeah. But it's going to be up to that executor to kind of make sure that things are going properly. So if they're going to go in and say, all right, well, I am the fiduciary person for this estate. I know that somebody came in here and took these guns that were worth XYZ, based on this. I mean, if they stole something, they stole it, right? It belongs to the estate. So you just kind of have to go about it probably in like a approach that will be, financially viable.
Well, I imagine that, when people die, people's come out of the woodwork and people turn into ravenous wolves to devour even what little estate there even is. I mean, even down to the penny in some cases. And we've had kind of an experience with that.
Yeah.
But it's like, I'm sure you see families get absolutely, someone dies and everybody it destroys a family.
Yeah.
So the question is, how do you avoid that?
Yeah.
Right. What could Grandma Susie have done? And maybe that transitions maybe a little bit into the estate planning side of things. What could Grandma Susie have done to avoid the confusion after she passes away?
Well, I think, obviously estate planning is something we're going to talk about and get into, but I know some of these questions are like, what are some other things you could do as well?
Yeah.
I think, one of the things especially is you could keep good records of things, like if you own a business. I had let's give a hypothetical scenario here where, you start a business and you have X person being the vice president and Y person being the treasurer, and you file that on your corporate taxes, and then the next year it's somebody else who's the president, and you got to make sure you register it in the right state and you keep it going, keep your business going, and re-register it and up to date. But like hypothetically, you get the person dies, right? And then the wife is like, well, I'm the owner because I was listed on the tax return as the owner, but there's no records in the business to support that. Mm-hmm. So there's no transfer of assets, stocks. There's no corporate shareholder meeting. There's nothing that would show it. It just is going to be a fight. It's going to be a fight because the person that started the business and was the president, their heirs or whoever it is are going to complain that it's theirs, right, and not the new spouse that they were married to, who's now listed on the corporate tax records, right? Yeah. So this isn't really estate planning; it's just keeping your records, organized and established. And if you're changing ownership or hands, or you're doing something to avoid taxes or to capitalize on your taxes, you got to make sure you keep the records right in your business. That's a scenario we've run into. It's just been a mess.
Yeah.
That's something. So obviously what you can do is you can, estate planning and estate planning is traditionally people think of it being, I don't even know if people think of the term estate planning. Is that like a term that people think of? I've just been in this for so long. Is that what you'd call it? I think
that it depends on kind of what level you're at. I mean, most people would say, well, my estate is this 4-wheeler and a couple guns. Yeah. And so, then maybe they might not view it as an estate.
I think most people think of like a will. They'll think, oh, a will.
That's estate planning, or death, like, what was it, like, what would you call it, Ethan, when you were selling stuff? Like end of life planning type of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to like funeral expenses and stuff, pre-planning and everything else.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I think too, because most people come in and they're like, I need to update my will, or I need a will. And a will just puts it into probate court when you pass, right? Like, so you avoid a few things with the will. You avoid it just going to the laws of whatever state you're in, right? So your heirs at law. It's generally probably going to be the same, right? It'll be spouse, then it'll be kids, then it'll be parents, then it'll be brothers and sisters after that, So if that's the order you're going in anyway, then there's not really much to do with a will, right? Because if that's the order you would want it to be in anyway, right? If your spouse is alive, you want to go to your spouse. If your spouse predeceases you, then you want to go to your kids.
Yeah.
If you have no kids, then it goes to your parents. If you have If your parents are dead, and then it goes to your brother. If that's how you would naturally do it, then you're not doing a ton by making a will.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Because it's still going to go.
Because the state would push it that way anyway.
Into court and probate, and the state would push it. It would just go to the laws of intestacy according to whatever state you're in, right?
Okay. But who would, let's say you have minors as kids.
That is when you would absolutely need to have a will, right? So you're right. And that's a situation where, you guys have kids. I have kids. You need somebody to be appointed as your guardian, and you need to have your wishes stated, and you need to have it signed and witnessed and notarized correctly according to the laws of your state. And you need to talk to them too. That's another thing that you do I don't do as the attorney, but you need to make sure that whoever you're going to leave
knows and is okay.
Yeah.
with that happening.
And is okay with that actually happening. Like, think about that,
Yeah.
And then I would have a backup too, in case what if they're not financially in a place, or what if they are?
Well, hopefully it will be with your life insurance claim, right?
Yeah, right. That's true.
Or something happened to them, or
or if you're all like in a plane all together and the plane crashes,
sure.
And then it's like, where'd my kids go?
Even maybe, if there was I hate to say it, but if there was like a divorce or something, and then you potentially wouldn't want your kids going to one of your siblings that's a single parent that's trying to deal with their own kids and figure stuff out,
those are literally scenarios that are, that I would talk about with my clients, and I would suggest multiple backups for people with minor children. Mm-hmm. And you talked about insurance, like life insurance. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if we want to get into that now, but so when most people just think of a will. Yeah. They're just like, will. Well, I need a will, or I need to update my will. And that's great, but it's cheaper than doing a trust. And it's less work because you just go to the attorney does it, and you sign it, and it's over. Yeah. And that's almost like, I don't know if you guys listen to Dave Ramsey or do any of that stuff. A little bit. Yeah. It's just the basic, the basic emergency fund type thing is how I look at it. Like, a will is just like the first step. Yeah. But when I do a trust for people, I also do a will as well, because it's a pour over will. It's for things that you don't capture in the trust, or you don't think to retitle. Mm-hmm. Because if you haven't titled whatever asset it is into the trust, then it's going to go into your estate. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have a will, then they're not going to know where to put that. But in a pour over will, you would have everything back into the trust.
So it's like a catch-all.
It's a catch-all. Yeah. And then for minors, you would also put who your guardian is, and backup successor and successors, a few back.
Yeah. So I want to talk more about the trusts. Yeah. And also about insurance. But I had another question for you. So probate, is the idea not to go to court? I feel like the benefit of going to court would be you have a legal recourse, to get someone else that's not family, that's not Uncle Buck, that's going to come and just take the stuff away. You have someone else who's a legal authority to say, hey, this actually goes here and here and here. Does that happen with a trust?
Yeah,
because with the trust, you don't have to go through probate, right?
Or what if a family like agrees on everything? Yeah. What if they're just like, Dad said, there's 5 kids, everybody gets a fifth, and we all split it up, and we feel comfortable with it, and that sounds good.
Yeah, then that would be an easy
Does it still have to go to court and all that other kind of stuff? Or?
Yeah, if it's not. Yeah, if the assets are titled to the person who died, then yes.
Oh, okay.
Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to retitle it.
Right, but in North Carolina, this is in North Carolina, real property passes outside of probate. So typically the default is if you are married and you purchase a property, it's with a joint ownership with a right of survivorship, which means, if it's you who passes first, it just automatically goes to your spouse. Yeah. If it's your spouse, it automatically goes to you. So that doesn't even have to go into court. But a lot of times, that it doesn't work out that way. It's not that clean. It's somebody, you buy it when you're single, then you get married or whatever. But yeah, so we can just we just kind of jumped ahead, but trusts are essentially you put more work in now. It's a little more expensive to go get an attorney to do a trust. And then there's a lot of follow-ups you have to do afterwards. Because if you go to an attorney to do a trust, they're going to help you create the document. The document is a document. It's signed and is legal and is valid, but it doesn't do anything until you put your assets into it.
Just a legal bucket.
It's just a bucket. It's a spot for you to be able to use. And
so you have to go in and reassign the title of your home to name the Thomas Trust or whatever.
Absolutely. And
you put in the J. Thomas Trust.
Yeah.
Just a plug for that trust there. Anything you want to throw in there, guys? You would do that by changing the deed.
Yeah.
And you'd probably go to a real estate attorney and change the deed, and then you have to record the deed in the county records. So there are steps you have to take. It's not just going to happen. You'd have to look for each asset. If it's personal property, there's a declaration page in the trust. So I say, I hereby assign all my personal property to my trust, Oh,
nice.
If it's intangibles, that's when you got to go figure it out. Like bank accounts, you go into the bank, you bring your trust document, you show the bank teller, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And then you retitle it. And you'll have to check in the laws of your state on how to do all these specific things. It's going to be different.
So bank accounts, stocks, probably crypto. At least, well, not if you have your own private wallet, but house, cars, boats, jet skis, anything with a title or a deed with an official thing. Everything else would just be under the catch-all. Well, if you have a catch-all on your deed, why would you need a pour-over will?
Well, that would just be for the house only.
Well,
the deed is you're talking about the right.
So
if you have a catch-all for your trust.
If you have a catch-all for your trust, it says all my personal assets go into this trust.
All my personal property.
Personal property.
So personal property are like things like
physical things.
Yeah, like things in your house. Yeah, furniture.
Okay.
If you own something by a title, a car, a house, a deed, your stocks or other things, then you have to retitle it into the trust. But I just say personal property, like my furniture, my shoes, my rings, the junk in your house,
the stuff in the safe.
Yeah. And you may want to specify where that goes specifically. If you've got something like if you've got guns that you want to hand out to specific people or something like that.
So you can write almost like a will within your trust. That's like a will of distribution.
Yeah.
Is that called something different than a will?
You can do a lot of things in your trust. You can specify. That's the beauty of it, is you can give all kinds of rules and regulations however you want it to be, and you put a trustee in charge, and that trustee does everything. So for minor children, for example, you create this trust, you have named who's your guardian under the will. You'll still have to go into court and get all that custody stuff done, right? The guardianship done. And then your life insurance policy, you'll have go to your trust, right? Then the person who is the trustee over your trust is going to be given a bunch of rules on as to how to take care of your kids, how much to give to the guardians, right? And it may be the same person. Your trustee of your trust may be the same person as your guardian, especially if you're going to have them take care of your kids. It doesn't have to be. If you want a layer of separation, that's fine. And then you can be really specific about how you want to, yes to, 4-year schools that are accredited, yes for clothes and food and maintenance and sports. They have to get a drug test before a distribution is out, right? So stuff like that. Or if they're going through a divorce, don't distribute anything.
Yeah.
Because you don't want the ex-spouse to get, don't want the spouse to get half.
Yeah.
If they don't do this, then they don't get the distribution or anything like that.
Yeah. Interesting.
So it can be really specific, and that's what's cool about a trust, is you kind of are managing your money after you're dead.
Now, what kind of a trust is this? A living trust?
So you asked that question. Living trust just means it's a broad term for different types of trusts. So when you create a trust, it's going to be a living trust because it's alive once you've executed it.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's the distinctions are revocable and irrevocable.
Okay.
So revocable means if Ethan, you create a trust. It's the Ethan Family Trust, or last name Thomas. Yeah, the Ethan Thomas Family Trust. You're typically not gonna want to make it irrevocable, because if you make it irrevocable, at that point you don't own those assets anymore. Whatever you put in there, it's its own living entity that has those assets. So they're not yours anymore.
So I couldn't go in and be like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah, it's over. Like, it's gone, the money's gone. I mean, I was reading
But if
about
you're the trustee, couldn't you just take it out again? I mean, you're in charge of that vehicle, right?
Or does it take approval from
you
certain
can't
people?
you can't be the trustee, a trustor and a trustee of an irrevocable trust. This is getting kind of technical, but you would do a revocable trust.
It's more locked in with an irrevocable
It's
trust.
locked in,
Okay.
yes, and people do that to avoid creditors. So if you are going through a bunch of stuff like a bankruptcy, or you know that there's somebody coming after you and you want to do an irrevocable trust, the creditors can't go after it because you don't own it anymore. It's not your assets, but you don't have those assets anymore either, right? So if you were like old and were going to die and you just wanted to put it there, then
And you could
can't
put
get-
it in the name of your children or whatever. And so
you could gift it, yeah, but I don't really. This is getting pretty technical. I would have to research these issues out
Yeah.
as we go. But a revocable trust, you would be the trustor and the trustee. They'd be the same person, right? And you'd be the first one. Your spouse would be the next, or you guys would both be the co-trustees, and then it becomes irrevocable when both of you die. So when the first one of you dies, it goes to your spouse. If you want to do it that way, you can get creative. You don't have to do it that way. And then when it becomes irrevocable, it's the trustee who you have coming in after you is going to do everything according to your trust rules. So anytime in a revocable trust, when you guys are alive, you can take it out. You can do whatever you want with it. It's really like it's your money. But you've set up the vehicle for it to become an irrevocable trust when you die.
So if I have a bunch of, let's say I have $1 million and I put it in an irrevocable trust, so that it's not technically mine, and then I set up the rules before I push the button on this thing that it has to distribute to me $50,000 a year. Do I have to count that as income?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Or can I just count that as a gift?
Well, it would be
To yourself.
It would be
donation.
from yourself to yourself.
Well, I would own it technically, right?
The creditors would track you down through
You'd pay.
litigation. Yeah,
You'd pay taxes on it twice, whenever you made it, and then whenever you
that's right.
get paid it again.
Wow. Yeah,
And you would want to speak with an accountant when you're dealing with irrevocable trusts.
Yeah.
Like, you almost want to speak to your accountant at any point when you're dealing with trusts.
Yeah.
I would just put the plug in there for the accountants.
Yeah.
So that was one thing I was going to say. Are there specific tax benefits to doing a trust over just, I guess, a simple will, or is it quicker as far as litigation or I guess probate goes?
Yeah. So if you're doing a trust, the goal is to not really have to do any probate. The goal is to have everything titled in the trust, so when you pass, it becomes irrevocable, and it's all done outside of court. You don't have to pay any attorneys.
You're paying the legal fees on the front end.
You pay them on the front end. It's way cheaper, and the timing is going to be quicker, and it's going to be more closed, because a will is public record. And it's out there for everyone. A trust is a private contract document, right? So it's not going to be out there.
Why would a will be public record?
Well, it's the court. It's in court.
They detail all the assets that you have
Yeah, I mean, your will's in there. Your will is public record.
and the amount of assets that you have.
I don't think necessarily the amount of assets that you have, but like who it goes to.
Unless it's specifically listed in the will.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Unless it's in the document.
Yeah. Because if the will just said, so-and-so gets my house,
Yeah.
that's not going to specifically say that
Yeah.
that house is worth $10 million.
Or my bank accounts,
Yeah.
or just the residue of my property. That doesn't describe anything,
Interesting.
But you want to have everything titled into the trust after you do that, so that doesn't happen in court. But you'll always have that pour over will pointing it back to the trust. So anyway,
Does that even work with I get rental properties. Let's say I had 10 rental properties. I could just dump them all into the trust.
I would want to talk to my accountant if I did that.
Inside LLCs, inside
I guess
the
it
trust.
depends on if you're wanting to keep them or, well, I guess it.
Yeah, like LLCs would be something. And this is business law. I don't practice in this, but I would probably actually consult with a business attorney. But you'd potentially make every one of them in an LLC separately.
I was talking to a guy the other day, and I just recently met him. We've talked several times at work, and he does commercial real estate. And I was talking to him and asked him about his personal portfolio, and he was saying that he has purchased several duplexes for like in the name of his kids, and so it's like the kids have purchased those duplexes, and I guess as the time's going on, I mean, as the mortgage is getting paid, and if there's any cash flow, that he's just kind of absorbing that or whatever else, and then at some point it's theirs. Like maybe when they turn 18 or whatever else, it'll be theirs. But is that kind of a way potentially to go around the litigation of a will or some kind of planning to just put things in the name of your kids?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's just a gift, but I know there's gift taxes, right?
Yeah,
mean, you can only gift so much over your
a
lifetime.
certain threshold.
Yeah.
There's a lifetime gift tax?
There's a lifetime gift thing too, and I don't know I'm not, like off the top of my head, I don't know exactly, but, per year you can gift so much, and then I think there's a lifetime.
Interesting. I have heard of that before.
Yeah.
Like the ultra wealthy, like when they start getting towards the end of their life, they just start giving away. It's like, this time of year, $10,000, $10,000, $10,000, $10,000.
Yeah.
It's like all their family, all their grandkids, because they want to minimize their estate tax as much as possible.
Well, and the federal estate exemption is really high right now. It's like $12 million. They're not gonna.
It's been hard to whittle that down.
No, I haven't had any clients at that amount, and then North Carolina doesn't have any estate tax either. So I think back in the 80s or whatever, it used to be way lower. So there was a lot of different creativity going on with trusts and stuff. So I think the tax implications were way more involved back then. And, this could change at any point, with the current administration. They're talking about it.
Didn't Trump's raise that limit?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
And I think, Biden's been talking about lowering it way down,
Yeah.
So there's other things like generation skipping tax types of trusts. And, honestly, I haven't gotten into that. I would refer that out to estate planning attorneys who do wealthy clients.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I wouldn't really want to talk about that too much.
One of the questions I had is I've seen some stuff on social medias about setting up a family corporation where each member is a shareholder and this kind of thing. Is this something that you've ever encountered?
That question had me stumped.
Yeah.
I didn't really know what we were going after here. Let me look at my notes that I took on that. Where is that at?
It was question number 3.
Oh, okay. I think it's probably because it's more of like a business law.
It might be kind of like that LLC type thing where each rental property had its own, LLC and
probably more of a tax thing.
Around tax
I would
thing.
assume, right? Because if everyone in the family owns stuff, it's more transferable, when someone dies maybe, or, each person owns a certain amount of stock. So for tax reasons, it helps. I don't know. I honestly don't know. I'd never
probably
heard.
a very nuanced thing.
Yeah, I would. That's probably a business law attorney question, which, I just haven't encountered that before.
So what if you come across someone who just doesn't have any money? I mean, it's just like they just don't have much of anything anyway. I mean, do you just kind of just let the family pick it apart? Or let's say, grandma was worth $10,000.
There's small estate administration rules. So there's like a spousal allowance. This is North Carolina. So there's going to probably be similar things in every state. But generally, there's like a $60,000 personal property allowance that can go to the spouse.
Mm-hmm.
So you just kind of bring them in, you gather up their assets, you put it on a form, you go take it to the clerk, and you say, hey, there's $5,000 here. Can we just assign this and this? And you get the clerk to stamp it. And so then if there's creditors, then you can say, there's a deficiency here in the spouse, so the spouse gets $60,000, so you have to just eat it to the creditor. So you'd want to do that for the spouse.
So if they owed $100,000 in credit card debt or something like that personally.
Yeah, they don't get that. They don't get the $5,000.
Oh, okay.
So it protects vulnerable.
What little amount there is.
Yeah, what little amount there is. And then there's other things. But yeah, if somebody comes in and it's on the estate planning side, I'll just be like, well, a simple will. I mean, I would just do a really simple will and try to get it done for as cheap as I can, you know, and just put together a quick, simple will. What
about these like online legal websites that are like, yeah, you know, do a will for $100 or something?
Yeah. I mean, I would tell them, hey, if you don't have that money, go to LegalZoom and do it, you know, or do it on your own, write it down. And it's called a holographic will. I mean, you can write down your own will and
you sign it, like get it notarized or something. I mean,
do you
have to get it notarized? Or that just depends on the state?
Oh man, I didn't look. I would have to just check my outline, but there's holographic wills.
Okay.
And you can write down your own will, and it is valid. If you write it, you sign it. I don't know off the top of my head, I don't know the actual rules, but it's really important to follow the actual rules to get a will valid. Mm-hmm. So just make sure that you take a look at that. But yeah, I had somebody call me the other day that was like, hey, I need to update my will. And he went through some of his stuff with me, and he used LegalZoom, and he was like, it was crap. It was garbage. I'm not going to do it again. I'm like, yeah, I mean, you're going to pay for what you get, you know, and if you don't want any advice and structure and creativity or somebody to just listen to you and tell you don't want a will, you in fact want a trust, you know, or why don't you do this first? You know, and they're not going to really talk too much about your powers of attorney, which are super important, like your financial and healthcare power of attorney, or, you know, your quote unquote living wills. Which are different things. We haven't talked about that. But.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess one thing we're kind of getting near towards the end here. So I guess one question.
Oh, man, time has passed.
It does. One of the things just generally, let's say, you know, just for a guy like me, I've got several kids, young kids, I'm married, I have several assets, stocks, a few cryptos, which are down right now, but they'll come back.
Today was brutal.
And so what would you, just off the shelf, someone generally in that situation, what types of things would you recommend? I know you just barely recommended, you said, a few different types of trusts.
Yeah.
What would you say?
I would say with what you just told me is probably a trust I would recommend. And just a living revocable trust. And I would tell you to title assets in your trust. Certain things you don't need to, like a life insurance policy is already kind of a trust, and so you're going to name a beneficiary. So anything that you have to name a beneficiary on, like maybe like a 401k, that already is going to go.
You don't need to title it.
You don't need to retitle that unless you want to. So if you titled your life insurance policy to Ethan, but he wasn't the guardian of your kids, right? That would be a little funky. You wouldn't want to do that. You would want to title it to your trust, because that would be who you would want to administer those rules according to the trust to take care of your kids. Yeah. So you just have to understand who you have being your guardian, and whether you want that distribution of that whatever $1 million life insurance policy to be according to some rules or not, or you just want a whole big payout to somebody. I mean, that's
yeah.
If it's your spouse, maybe. Yeah. And then your
spouse, maybe. But maybe if you and your spouse, something were to happen at the same time, then I'm guessing it would go to your kids.
Yeah.
But then one of your kids that's 10 years old is going to get $1 million check?
That they can't even do that. It would go to the guardian. There's rules, I think, on that. UTMA, I think is what it is.
Kind of like age restrictions and stuff.
Yeah. So it would go to a guardian, and in that scenario, you would need to have it go to, so if you have a life insurance policy, you probably just need to have a trust. And if you have kids.
Interesting.
So I would just recommend it just off that, but then you have more assets that you're talking about, and you're going to acquire more as you go, and it's just going to be more.
You are.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are.
More and more important to have the trust, in my opinion.
What, just generally, we got listeners from all around the world, but generally, what would this cost someone?
I think that's very state specific and very region specific within the state. Like a Charlotte or Raleigh office is going to charge more than
a Fort Mill office.
A Fort Mill office, or even like a Salisbury office, I think
are they going to do any better of a job?
Probably.
Yeah. So
I don't know. That's going to depend on the attorney, you know. But maybe they'll be more familiar with like your type of business or something if it's within the city. I don't know. But it's also going to depend on, some attorneys charge by the hour. Like if it's a complicated trust, they're just going to start charging by the hour versus like a flat rate or something. Do you have to have
an attorney to assign things into the trust, or is the attorney just like the setting up of the bucket, and then I can do all of the assigning on my own?
You can do all the assigning on your own.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll work with people and just say, hey, if you got questions, just call me about it after we set up the trust, and I can point you in the right direction. Or if they wanted me to do it, you don't really want the attorney to do everything that you can do, because then they're going to charge by the hour. Attorneys can have their paralegals do things too and charge bill at a lower rate as well. It's just going to depend on the attorney, the firm, how complex it is, how long they've been practicing, how, their reputation. These are all serious considerations in like the price of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you check on a lawyer's reputation?
Well, there's like certain things like their ratings on like Super Lawyers, AVO ratings.
AVO, what is that a website?
Yeah, it's like peer-reviewed ratings. Also just like Google reviews. I mean, everything's becoming super transparent.
Those can be mostly faked. Anybody can fake a Google review.
Yeah.
Well, in the financial, they have in the financial realm, they have like a broker finder thing, or like the FINRA has a thing. You can go up and you can put in your broker's number, and you can see if there's any actions against them.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's something similar for lawyers.
Yeah, I mean, you can go onto the State Bar website and probably find that, but that's not how I would find an attorney.
But I mean, for doing some kind of trust, setting up a trust, though. I mean, that's not you're not going to court or anything.
I think that it may be maybe for you to just feel comfortable with them and feel like they understand what you're talking about and understand your situation and can connect with you. I think that might be one of the better things. And then just make sure that, I would still make sure and check online that they seem legit. I check their website. If they, and if they don't have a website, they're super old school, check with some people that know them. Yeah. You know what I mean? But it's really about your connection with them. I think it always is about relationships.
Yeah. Plus, practicing without a law license is a crime, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So.
Very good. Well, I think this has been some great advice. Obviously, there's so much.
Not legal advice. This has just been talking.
This is great conversation.
Yes.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Thank you for that correction.
Yeah.
But it's good to just understand, what maybe financial considerations I should make. So thank you for that. But one question we want to ask you that we always ask our guests at the end of the podcast is a little bit about your personal creed. We're all about creeds on the show. So a creed is a set of beliefs or principles that guides one's actions. And this could be a quote or a mantra or a scripture or anything that life advice. We'd love to hear a piece of your personal creed. Feature that with us.
Yeah, I liked this question. It kind of made me think. I think it makes you focus on, you try to boil it down to your true core. I don't really do well with like personal mantras or quotes or inspirational things or books, business books that are the one all answer to everything, that if you do this, So I kind of felt like my beliefs would be more like relationships, like we just talked about. So my relationship with God, my relationship with my family, and my relationship with society. So friends, community, that type of stuff, in that order. So I think that's kind of my creed, and I think relationships and people are more dynamic than just maybe like could be answered with a belief or just one thing. So it's just going to be moving. So I think my kind of my actions are based on those relationships and my, kind of my movement. Another thing, though, I will say that, you guys made me think about this just with this question. It's a good question. I'd say another thing is balance. I see a lot of people just kind of, they go all out in one thing or one part of their life, and then they get burnt out. And you talk to them the next year and they're like, oh, I'm not doing that at all anymore, or I got exhausted with that or whatever. And they just go up and down. So I always try to work on all aspects. So, kind of like our church is kind of pushes this, but yep. I don't want to just push my spirituality, and I don't want to just push my physicality and exercise. I don't want to just push my career, which a lot of people get stuck in. I got stuck in that for 3 years in Vegas, where I felt like it was the only thing. And like, if I was failing at that, I was failing at everything. Yeah. And it was completely untrue. And I didn't figure that out until I got outside of that. And I was like, whoa, they had me stuck in this. I was like basically a rat in a cage, just running, smashing pumpkins.
Yeah. Despite all my rage, right?
That's right. But I just try to keep the balance in that. So that kind of would be like my personal mantra. I kind of do like to view things in balance. So yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I love that. The other day we were on a conference call, and it was like one of those get-to-know-you questions. They're like, what skills do you have that you can't use at work? And I was like, the majority of my skills. I was like, almost everything. In fact, I think I've got so many other different things that I'm doing right now. I was like, shooting skills,
nunchuck skills,
computer hacking skills. And like, I was like, there's so many other things I do, like the podcast. I'm just like, I use only a fraction of who I am as a person at this job. That's why sometimes I feel like I'm unsatisfied at work. I feel like I could do something much greater,
can't really
wasted potential,
Jiu-jitsu at work. Sometimes you probably wish you could.
I wish I could, yeah. But, so anyway, I love that.
And I really liked what you said about relationships. I mean, that's, we've heard a lot of different creeds on the podcast, and I mean, each one of them has been just really awesome in their own way. But I really like kind of the importance of not so much looking at things or moments, but relationships and how that affects your life.
Yeah.
From the top all the way to the bottom.
Yeah. And they change you and what you're thinking about too. And, what you view as important when you meet somebody who's super interesting or something, it can kind of change what you're doing anyway.
Yeah. And the people you surround yourself with is kind of a accumulation of who you are or who you will become potentially.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So, hey, Nick, thank you so much. I do want to give a shout out. We do have listeners in North Carolina, and you can give legal advice in North Carolina. So, do you have a website that people can check out on?
Yeah, Curcio Anderson Law. I mean, you can Google us, Curcio Anderson Law. That's our website. Personal injury, estate planning. My partner does criminal defense, traffic tickets and that type of stuff. So
you guys are in the Charlotte area?
Yeah, we're in Matthews.
Okay.
But Charlotte, for those of you who don't really know the area, but yeah.
Very good. Well, thank you, Nick. And for the listeners, appreciate you listening today. And you can follow us on social medias, and we're posting some different clips of the episode. So thanks for joining, and let's build that creed together.
All right, let's do it. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you, guys.